Hello and welcome to the lecture on World War I and the home front, and to see how the war changed American society and economy. And we've seen before, to some degree, with the Civil War, how mass mobilization and the need to organize the nation for war sort of entails an enlargement of the government, particularly the executive branch, and ultimately the power of the executive branch as well. So sort of stretching its powers. And in particular, with World War II, this happened. So a lot of what we see with this lecture, we'll see again with World War II, but with World War II, it's just on such a larger scale, these changes. And so changes, well, government control of the economy, like a wartime socialism or a central planning in a sense, and rapid economic growth with the demand and the demand for war munitions and food and all the other things that are needed to organize and move and equip soldiers, and not just American soldiers, Britain and France, very large orders coming in. A suspension or like a rollback of civil liberties, and a little bit of hysteria and emotions going out as well, and opportunities for women and African Americans. Both of them will see some opportunities in this time. All right, so we'll start with the economy and just sort of some of the shifts that we're going to see. So if we look on our political spectrum here and we look at where the United States was sort of going into the war, they're sort of like here with a balance between the like a free market capitalism and the need for the government to have in some regulations, though they haven't really shifted to the left wing of government involvement in the economy too much. And in terms of civil liberties, which is this axis here, with this being very authoritative and this being complete freedom, they're relatively quite free people in the United States. But that's going to sort of shift, and so we're going to move kind of like over here into this little corner over there. And that's sort of my best guess of about where I would say they would be. And of course, they'll shift back away from this when the war ends, and there'll be sort of a new alignment of the political spectrum. So economic changes from recession to boom, with the British and French demand in particular driving this boom, and unemployment dropping from 8% down to a very low of around 2%. Most of the people are involved in manufacturing, and they go from a country of borrowers to a creditor nation, and the war, and particularly World War II, will have the effect of shifting the financial capital of the world from, say, London to New York City more. And central planning. War Industries Board was set up, and its sort of purpose was to allocate key resources to key industries, particularly iron and coal and other things like rubber and oil as well. And the Food and Fuel Administrations, which were set up to help conserve these. Rationing was sort of set in, and there's a lot of sort of propaganda encouraging Americans to go with less, or to find other means of maybe grow your own kind of way. Now, the overall impact of this central planning is rather small. Like, the war for the United States was a very short thing, and these were all disbanded when the war ended. However, what it does do is it increases the confidence of people who are sort of left-leaning, that this is the best way to meet national crisis, is for the government to be, setting up and planning. And certainly in wartime, and possibly even in peacetime as well. And this view of government in control of the economy and involvement will become increasingly important when the Great Depression comes in. So, all the government programs in the 1930s to deal with the Great Depression really are reflected with these precedents. And that's sort of the key idea of these central planning. It's setting a precedent for a later time. Now, paying for the war. It's very expensive. War always is. $32 billion, or another way to put it, about half of their GDP from this time period. And so that's showing just how influential it was and how much money was sort of spent. How are they going to pay for it? Well, about 20% on taxes, and another 20% just from inflation, just printing it, but the majority from bonds. And people, banks, or individuals could purchase a bond, and so you're just sort of lending money to the government over a short period of time. And there's a lot of sort of propaganda and push to encourage Americans to buy bonds. This is showing the growth, and we've got two things here. This on the left is showing wages and an average annual income, and we can see it's more than doubling. But here we're seeing over here the prices. So you're making more, but you're paying more, and they're sort of offsetting each other with the inflation that happened. And that inflation largely happening because of the printing of money and as the economy is booming. And so there's a lot more dollars out there chasing fewer things, and that's going to, just through supply and demand, is going to see an increase of prices. Now, labor in the war. Most laborers and unions are loyal to the war effort, particularly Samuel Gompers, he's still around, and the American Federation of Labor. And there are modest gains made, improvements, but not their main goal that, labor is looking for, the right to bargain collectively and to see that their unions are legally recognized. And the other side of labor, the more radical socialist revolutionary side, is represented by the IWW. They vigorously protested the war. They said it's just a capitalistic war, and it's the banks will make all the money, and the working class will they'll fill all the coffins, and they're conducting sabotage, and the government's going to use the powers that they have, and we're going to look at it in a moment, to sort of weaken them, especially after the war. Now, selling the war. And this is another sort of expansion and stretching of government powers. The realization that they can utilize these new mediums of mass communication and new sort of sciences like psychology and merging them together. When George Creel, a journalist, and he's running what's called the Committee on Public Information, which is really just the propaganda committee, you might call it. And he was selling the war in two prominent ways. One is known as the 4-minute speeches, where celebrities or other people would give a short speech of why you should support the war or how you can support the war. And that's what this picture is showing here. And that man right there is Charlie Chaplin, superstar of the time. This is the first time of really, mega celebrities and mass communications and broad sort of popular culture. And they weren't always, these big events with the huge celebrities coming in. More often than not, you go out for an evening and you go to see a movie, and before the movie there would be, a couple of speeches made, and that would be the more likely way people would hear the 4-minute speeches. And then the posters would be the other way that's coming in. Now, the CPI, the Committee on Public Information, it's an early pioneer of modern advertising, and after the war will be sort of the first great age of advertising, which is tapping in, as I said, to this new subject area, psychology. And it's not, as they discover, you're not really necessarily selling the product, but it's an emotional appeal. And with consumer product advertising, you're often selling an image, not of the product, but maybe of a certain kind of lifestyle. And Creel and his men of the CPI, they, understood they're tapping into some of our baser emotions, like fear or hate and anger, can sell. And some of our loftier, higher ideals, patriotism or helping out and pitching in, those can also sell. And you can see these reflected very much in the posters of the time. These are the ones, together, and what you can do, if you can't be a soldier, well, work harder at work and help out, or the fear ones. And these are two very much, selling the war out of fear. Another fear, or the opposite side. Which side are you on? And then I just want to include it in because I absolutely love it. The one way of how can you help? Well, little kids, join a pig club. 40,000 boys and girls are raising pigs, and you can do it too. Join a pig club. Don't delay. Join today. And, sounds fun. All right, now, a lot of this, tapping into fear, tapping into hate, selling, the hate of Germany, it manifested itself in a really ugly way in what we might call German phobia or fear of Germany. And, as most immigrants are very steadfastly loyal and want an opportunity to show it, but, people don't necessarily see that or believe it. and a lot of German hysteria gripping. Mozart and Bach stops being played. The renaming foods like hamburgers getting new names. Sauerkraut became Liberty Cabbage. Streets or towns that are named after Germans could have a new name. German measles became Liberty Measles. A big town in Canada, Berlin, Ontario, changed its name to Kitchener, Ontario, still called Kitchener today. Many Germans just maybe hide their German ethnicity. Maybe they've been born in America, but, because of their father or their grandfather, they got a very German name like Schmidt or Müller, very common names, changing them to the anglicized versions of Smith or Miller. Beer brewers, who are very much usually German, they were sort of attacked or boycotted. And there was also that push of prohibition. One reason why prohibition came around at this time was backlash against foreigners. And sometimes the fear went right to straight up lynching of German Americans. All right, another expansion of government power is through the Espionage and Sedition Acts, which strong punishment for interfering with the war, which, okay, I can see that, but saying anything negative about the war, that doesn't sound like a democracy. And if, we're going over there to, make the world safe for democracy, kind of want to have it at home. But the government would use these laws, these powers, to go after their political enemies, particularly the far left, the socialists. And, these are three prominent socialists, Emma Goldman, Eugene Debs, and Big Bill Haywood, all sort of punished for going against the war, speaking against the war, encouraging Americans not to register for the draft. Even flying a German flag could get you charged under these laws. And there's Eugene Debs, and he would be put into prison. He'd run for president in 1916, garnered quite a few votes. And 1912, he'd also run, and he's going to run again while he's in prison. And I think he got like 2 million votes. Fairly prominent. And yeah, he's speaking out against the war, calling it a capitalistic war, as I said before. And if you look at the First Amendment, Congress shall make no law abridging the freedom of speech or of the press. Well, it came to the Supreme Court who said, sometimes we need to have this limited when there's a period of clear and present danger, which is a pretty weak argument. All right, and finally, the opportunities that the war afforded for African Americans and for women. The war is going to be the beginning of the Great Migration, which really there's two. There's one from 1916 to 1930 of African Americans fleeing the racism from the South. 1930 is sort of a stop put to it because of the Great Depression. And there's just no work really anywhere, and especially for African Americans, and they were just not wanted anywhere. But this time, there was a high demand for labor in the industrial cities, and so more and more opportunities for African Americans who before would be last hired, first fired. Well, now, hey, come on in, we need you. Yeah, you're last hired, but there's still an opening for you. And literally escaping sometimes because many of them were in debt peonage in the sharecropping system, and so some of them had to run in the dead of the night, and most heading up into the industrial cities of the Midwest. And it's not always in this straight line. There might be some here that will go out to here as well. And for women and the war, okay, there's also opportunities. Many volunteered as nurses or for other ways to participate in the war, and there's more employment being opened up, but it was short-lived. The employment is not really long-lasting. When the war ends, they were expected to give up their job, and that taste of equality was there, but sort of a push back to traditional roles after the war. After the Second World War, there's going to be much more of a I don't want to go back kind of a feeling to it. And the 19th Amendment guaranteeing the right to vote shall not be taken away based on gender. This is passed during the war. But the 19th Amendment, we must keep in mind, it's the culmination of decades of protest and activism by women and many male supporters. And they've been very effective at the state level, and a number of states had already prior to the war, expanded suffrage to include women. So the amendment is not a thank you to women or some kind of reward bestowed on them by male politicians. But the war did give a political climate in which Woodrow Wilson, who before really not supported it, but now he can sort of publicly support it, and it doesn't hurt him politically the way it might have before, when he was reluctant to endorse the 19th Amendment. And that's a picture showing Alice Paul. Okay, so that's the home front for World War I, and again, we'll see a lot of sort of synthesis to this with World War II, and government's expanding role, a rapid rising economy, unemployment dropping, concerns with inflation, opportunities for African Americans, limited opportunities for women, and government sort of expanding their power to suspend or limit people's rights during this time period. All right, thank you very much for listening.